A shootout is a gun battle between armed groups. A shootout often, but not necessarily, pits law enforcement against criminal elements. It could also involve two groups outside of law enforcement, such as rival gangs. A shootout in a warlike context would usually be considered a battle, rather than a shootout. Shootouts are often portrayed in action films and Western films. Famous shootouts in the United States and Territories. The greatest shootout in the West December 19, 1854. While trekking on a miner's trail along the North Fork of the American River, Dr. Bolivar Sparks, James McDonald and Captain Jonathan Davis were bushwhacked by an international band of bandits. The bandits, a Frenchman, 2 Americans, 2 Englishmen, 4 Mexicans and 4 Australians, had recently robbed and killed 4 American miners on December 18, 1854, and 6 Chinese miners on December 17, 1854. MacDonald was killed instantly, and Dr. Sparks was fatally wounded. However, Captain Davis, an Army veteran, pulled out both of his pistols and killed 7 of the bandits in quick order. Out of bullets, Captain Davis, an expert fencer, pulled out his Bowie knife and killed 4 more of his attackers. The surviving bandits fled for their lives. The shootout was witnessed by a group of miners, who buried the bodies of the dead. Goering Snake Massacre April 15, 1872. Shooting breaks out during a highly charged trial in the Cherokee Nation. Deaths, U.S. Marshals, 8. Cherokee citizens, 3. Jesse James Northfield Bank Robbery September 7, 1876. Jesse James, Cole Younger, and their gang attempted to rob a bank in Northfield, Minnesota. They exchanged fire with the townspeople. 2 of the gang members were killed in the firefight along with 2 innocent civilians. Deaths, James Younger Gang, 2. Northfield Town, 2. Gunfight at the OK Corral October 26, 1881. Deputy U.S. Marshal and Tombstone City Marshal Virgil Earp, Assistant Marshal Morgan Earp, and Special Police Officers Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, faced off against outlaw cowboys Ike Clanton, Billy Claiborne, Tom McClory, and Frank McClory in Tombstone, Arizona Territory. Outcome, Clanton-McClory, 3 killed. Earp's Holliday, 3 wounded. Mabry-O'Connor Shootout October 19, 1882. Mechanics National Bank President Thomas O'Connor, businessman Joseph Mabry, Jr., and Mabry's son, Joseph Mabry, 3, were killed in a shootout in Knoxville, Tennessee. The incident was documented in Chapter 40 of Mark Twain's 1883 book, Life on the Mississippi. Deaths, O'Connor, 1. Mabry, 2. Frisco Shootout December 1, 1884. Legendary lawman Elfigo Barker ignited an intense shootout with 80 cowboys in Frisco, New Mexico. Deaths, Cowboys 4. Barker, 0. Coffeyville Bank Robbery October 5, 1892. The Dalton Gang attempted to rob 2 banks simultaneously in Coffeyville, Kansas, only to find themselves ambushed by lawmen and armed townspeople before they could make their escape. The gang was cornered in an alley and shot to pieces by the swarming townspeople. Emmett Dalton is the only outlaw to survive. Deaths, Robbers 4. Townspeople, 4. Battle of Matteawan, West Virginia May 19, 1920. Private agents from the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency battled with the local sheriff, the town's mayor, and a group of coal miners, over an attempt by Baldwin Felts agents to evict coal miners from their homes during a strike. Deaths, townspeople 3. Baldwin Felts, 7, c. Battle of Matteawan, Bonnie and Clyde. Joplin, Missouri March 22, 1933. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow and their friends entered a firefight with the local police who had been sent to investigate them in Joplin, Missouri. Deaths, Lawman 2. Bonnie and Clyde, 0. The Kansas City Massacre June 17, 1933. Kansas City, Missouri. In an attempt to free their friend, a criminal gang ambushed 7 FBI agents and Kansas City police at the train station as they were escorting captured fugitive Frank Nash back to prison. The FBI agents were unarmed, but the local police exchanged fire with the criminal gang. The gang unintentionally killed Nash along with the law officers. The FBI claimed that the gang included Charles "Pretty Boy" Floyd, but the evidence is debatable and contradicts with Floyd's alleged presence. Deaths: Kansas City Police, 2. Oklahoma Police, 1, FBI, 1. Nash, 1. Gang, 0. Little Bohemia April 22, 1934. Manito-ish Waters, Wisconsin. A team of FBI agents led by Special Agent Melvin Purvis attempted to ambush bank robber John Dillinger and his gang at the Little Bohemia Lodge, a hotel and restaurant being used as a hideout. The ambush was botched when a truck full of civilian Conservation Corps workers, who had been dining at the lodge, was misidentified as Dillinger's men by the agents, who opened fire, killing one of the civilians and wounding 2 more. Dillinger and his men briefly exchanged gunfire with Purvis's men before fleeing out the back of the lodge. FBI agent W. Carter Baum was killed, and another agent wounded, by Babyface Nelson during the gang's escape. Deaths: FBI 1. Civilians, 1. Dillinger's gang, 0. Battle of Barrington November 27, 1934. Barrington, Illinois. Notorious bank robber Lester Gillis George Babyface Nelson, his wife Helen, and gang member John Chase, encountered an FBI car driven by agents Thomas Dade and William Ryan on a highway outside Barrington. Nelson pursued the FBI agents, exchanging gunfire with them, until his car was disabled. 2 more agents, Special Agent Herman Ed Hollis and Inspector Sam Cowley, arrived on the scene and engaged Nelson and Chase in a shootout. Though Nelson was wounded 17 times by the agents, he and Chase were able to fatally injure both Hollis and Cowley. Nelson escaped, only to die that evening from his injuries. Deaths: FBI 2. Nelson, 1. Ma Barker January 16, 1935. Ma Barker and her gang were blown up in a bank by the FBI during a shootout in the area near Ocala, Florida. 2 FBI were shot at the beginning of the shootout. Deaths: Barker's 2. Lawman, 2. The Palace Chop House Shootout October 23, 1935. Gangster Dutch Schultz and cronies battle with rival mobsters from Murder, Incorporated at Schultz unregistered trademark S headquarters in the Palace Chop House restaurant in Newark, New Jersey. Deaths: Schultz Gang, 4. Murder, Incorporated 0. Truman assassination attempt November 1, 1950. Puerto Rican nationalists Oscar Collazo and Griselio Torresella got into a shootout with officers of the Capitol Police and Secret Service while attempting to break into the Blair House and assassinate President Harry Truman. By the end of the gun battle, Torresella and Officer Leslie Koffold were killed in an event that firearms instructor Massat Iwood called the boldest attempt at home invasion in modern history. Deaths: Police 1. Assassins, 1. Austin Tower Sniper August 1, 1966. Charles Whitman barricaded himself at the top of the tower at the University of Texas at Austin and proceeded to fire randomly from the tower. He eventually received return fire from police and armed civilians. He was killed in a final shootout when his perch was stormed by Austin police. Deaths: 18. Newell Massacre On April 6, 1970, California Highway Patrol officers engaged heavily armed criminals Bobby Davis and Jack Twining in a shootout in the parking lot of a restaurant near Newell, California. In a span of 5 minutes, Davis and Twining killed 4 CHP officers, making it the deadliest day in the history of Californian law enforcement. Davies was later arrested, while Twining killed himself following a long standoff with police. Deaths: CHP officers, 4. Twining, 1. Marin County Courthouse Shootout August 7, 1970. In an attempt to free his brother, imprisoned Black Panther leader George Jackson, 17-year-old Jonathan Jackson entered a courthouse in Marin County, California with an arsenal of weapons. After storming into a room where a trial was taking place, Jackson armed defendant James McClain, who was on trial for murdering a prison guard, and two fellow convicts who were participating in the trial as witnesses, William Christmas and Rutger McGee. The four armed men then took the judge, a district attorney and three jurors hostage, and marched them out of the courthouse into a waiting getaway van. As they attempted to flee the scene, a shootout broke out between the hostage-takers and Marin County Sheriff's deputies providing security at the courthouse. By the end of the gun battle, Jonathan Jackson, McClain, Christmas, and Judge Harold Haley were killed. According to the other hostages, Haley was executed by the hostage-takers with a shotgun that had been taped to his throat. McGee was severely injured, but survived the battle and was sentenced to life in prison. One juror and the DA were also wounded. One of the weapons used by Jackson was later traced to Black Panther icon Angela Davis, who was later tried for participation in the crime. It was later alleged by a Marin General Hospital doctor that Judge Haley was being treated for a brain tumor and should have been recused from trying cases for health reasons. Deaths, suspects 3. Hostages, 1. Pine Ridge Shootout June 26, 1975. A confrontation and gun battle between American Indian Movement activists and the FBI on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. Deaths, FBI 2. AIM, 1. Golden Dragon Massacre September 4, 1977. The massacre took place at 2:30 a.m. at the Golden Dragon restaurant in San Francisco, California. A long-standing feud between two rival Chinatown gangs, the Joe Boys and Wah Ching, came to a head when a botched assassination attempt by the Joe Boys at the restaurant led to 5 civilians, including 2 tourists, being killed, and 11 others injured. The assassination attempt came about after members of Wah Ching vandalized the graves of Joe Boys members, breaking an unspoken taboo of respecting the dead. Deaths, civilians 5. Gang members, 0. Move was a Back to Nature, anti-technology group in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the 1970s and 1980s. They were involved in 2 shootouts with the Philadelphia police. August 8, 1978, Powelton Village. During an attempt to forcibly remove the group from the home in which they were living, a shootout took place between the police and the group. 1 police officer was killed. 9 of the group members were tried and sentenced for murder. Deaths, Police 1. Move, 0, May 13, 1985, Osage Avenue. In a failed attempt to serve arrest warrants on 4 members of the group, Philadelphia police became engaged in a gun battle at MOV unregistered trademark S communal residence. About 10,000 rounds of ammunition were fired by the police. The police dropped a bomb on the house, starting a fire which burned down 62 houses and killed 11 people. Deaths, Move 11. Police, 0. Norco Bank Robbery Shootout May 9, 1980. Prolonged shootout and chase between police in Narco, California, and 5 heavily armed bank robbers wearing military-style fatigues and armed with assault rifles, thousands of rounds of hollow-point bullets as well as various explosive and incendiary devices. Police responded to a bank robbery call in Narco. Upon arriving, the police were ambushed and outgunned. After unloading over 300 rounds at police cruisers, the officers were forced to retreat behind their cruisers or nearby obstacles, all the while being fired upon. The suspects attempted to escape in their own vehicle. During this attempt, the driver of the suspects was killed by a stray police shot. The suspects then hijacked a nearby vehicle and became involved in a prolonged chase, in which the suspects shot at police and disabled and destroyed 33 police vehicles with explosives thrown from the back of a truck. The suspects also disabled a police helicopter by shooting at it. Later, the suspects lay in wait for police as they chased them, and ambushed them, resulting in the death of a police officer and wounding 2 others. Heavily outgunned, the police were pinned down until one officer arrived with an AR-15 carbine. After the police engaged the suspects with the AR-15, the suspects fled. One of the suspects was killed in the shootout, one during a later standoff with the police the next day, and 3 were later captured. 8 officers were also wounded during the events. Deaths, suspects 2. Police, 1. Brinks armored truck robbery October 20, 1981. An attempted armed robbery of a Brinks armored truck by members of the Weather Underground and Black Liberation Army resulted in a shootout and the deaths of 2 police officers and a Brinks security guard in Nyack, New York. The robbers, wearing body armor and equipped with assault rifles, initially ambushed the armored truck when it was parked at a shopping mall, killing Brinks guard Pete Page and wounding his partner. After taking $1.6 million in cash and attempting to flee in a U-Haul truck, they were stopped at a roadblock set up by police. In a second shootout, police officers Waverly Brown and Ed O'Grady were killed and the robbers fled the scene in several different directions. 4 of the robbers were arrested during their escape attempt, and more than 6 other people involved were arrested in subsequent investigations over the next several years. The last arrest was made in 1986. Deaths, suspects 0. Police, 2. Brinks guards, 1. Gordon Carl February 13, 1983. Tax protester Gordon Carl traded shots with U.S. Marshals when they attempted to arrest him in Medina, North Dakota. Deaths, U.S. Marshals, 2. Carl, 0, June 3, 1983. Gordon Carl was killed in a shootout with federal agents and the local sheriff in Smithville, Arkansas, in the house where he was hiding out. Deaths, Carl 1. Sheriff, 1. FBI Miami shootout April 11, 1986. 2 FBI agents and 2 suspects were killed in a prolonged and intense firefight between the FBI and bank robbery suspects William Mateeks and Michael Platt in Miami, Florida. The event became one of the most famous shootouts in American history, with 10 participants, roughly 145 rounds fired, and 4 deaths. Even though the FBI agents outnumbered the suspects 4-1, the FBI were outgunned by the suspects. It took a total of 18 hits to bring the gun battle to an end. Deaths, FBI 2. Suspects, 2. Lance Thomas From 1989 to 1992, Los Angeles watch merchant Lance Thomas was involved in 4 shootouts with armed robbers. In those 4 events, he killed a total of 5 and wounded another, while also being shot a total of 5 times. Thomas survived each shootout without permanent injuries, but eventually chose to close his store to avoid further bloodshed. Deaths, suspects 5. Thomas, 0. Ruby Ridge August 1992. In a 10-day siege, agents of the BATF, FBI, and U.S. Marshals armed with sniper rifles and M16s shot it out with survivalist Randy Weaver and his family in the wilderness near Bonners Ferry, Idaho. Deaths, Weaver's 2. Federal agents, 1. Branch Davidian siege February 28 April 19, 1993. Heavily armed members of the Branch Davidian sect engaged federal agents of the BATF in an intense firefight during a raid of their compound building, initiating a 51-day siege by the FBI near Waco, Texas. Deaths, Branch Davidians, 6. BATF, 4. Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Headquarters Shootout November 22, 1994. Ex-con Benny Lee Lawson entered the cold case squadron at the D.C. Metropolitan Police Headquarters armed with a Cobra M11 semi-automatic pistol and opened fire, killing FBI Special Agents Martha Dixon Martinez and Michael Miller, and D.C. Metro Police Sergeant Henry Daly, and seriously wounding FBI Special Agent John Kuchta before killing himself. Deaths, Police 1. FBI, 2. Suspects, 1. North Hollywood Shootout February 28, 1997. Following a bank robbery in North Hollywood, California, two heavily armed and body-armored bank robbers with numerous assault rifles ignited an intense firefight with about 375 officers of the Los Angeles Police Department for 44 minutes. The only deaths were the two bank robbers, Larry Eugene Phillips, Jr., Emil de Keeble Matasaranu. However, 12 police officers and 8 civilians were injured. Carl Drigger. On August 19, 1997, Carl Drigger, a New Hampshire resident who had long been in conflict with the government over alleged land code violations, opened fire on NH State Trooper Scott Phillips after he was pulled over for a routine traffic stop. Drigger, armed with a scoped AR-15, killed Phillips and another trooper, Les Lord, who arrived on the scene as backup. Then he stole Phillips' police cruiser and drove to the offices of the Colebrook News and Sentinel, where he killed Judge Vicky Bunnell and newspaper editor Dennis Jews, who tackled him in an attempt to disarm him. After this, Drigger drove home to set his house on fire, then drove to Vermont where he opened fire and critically injured a Vermont trooper who had followed him after identifying the stolen NH police car. Eventually, Drigger abandoned the vehicle at a Vermont farmhouse and ambushed a group of law enforcement officers from multiple agencies who had been sent to track him down. After a long shootout in which 2 more officers were injured, Drigger was killed by Border Patrol Agent Stephen Brooks and NH State Trooper Charles West, who were respectively armed with an M14 rifle and Remington 870 shotgun. Deaths: Police 2. Civilians, 2. Suspect, 1. Injuries, Police 3. Columbine High School Massacre April 20, 1999. During the massacre, school shooters Eric Harris and Dylan Kobold exchanged fire with Denver police 3 times. Although 12 students and 1 teacher died, 21 others were injured and both the shooters committed suicide that day. No officers were killed or injured. Tyler Courthouse Shootout February 24, 2005. David Hernandez Arroyo attacked his ex-wife, Maribel Estrada, and her son outside the courthouse in Tyler, Texas. Arroyo was armed with a semi-automatic MAK-90 rifle. Mrs. Estrada was shot in the head and died. Her son was shot in the leg but recovered. The shots immediately brought a response from nearby Sheriff unregistered trademark S deputies and Tyler police. Arroyo began trading gunfire with the officers, who were armed only with pistols, and forced them to retreat, wounding several of them. A passing civilian, Mark Allen Wilson, drew his own pistol and attempted to aid the officers but Arroyo was wearing body armor and Wilson's pistol failed to stop him. Wilson was shot and killed by Arroyo. Afterward, Arroyo jumped in his pickup and led police on a high-speed chase, exchanging gunfire along the way. Arroyo was eventually shot and killed by a responding officer armed with a CAR-15 rifle. Deaths: 3. Toddler dies in shootout July 10, 2005, Los Angeles, California. Joseph copyright Raul P. ± while high on cocaine, threatened his wife, took his 19-month-old daughter Susie Marie Lopez hostage, then used the child as a human shield while he exchanged fire with the LAPD SWAT team. P ± fired more than 40 shots at the police, and the police fired more than 100 rounds at P ± A. Deaths: 2. Scott Barnaby On April 24, 2007, Scott Barnaby of South Bend, Indiana shot at officers outside his motel room. Barnaby and one of the officers were killed, and another officer was injured. Gun dealer Ronald Wedge was found guilty of selling a gun to Barnaby illegally, and was sentenced to 10 months in prison. Deaths: Barnaby 1. Police 1. 2009 Oakland shootings On March 21, 2009, 4 Oakland police officers and the suspect were killed in a shootout. Deaths: Suspect 1. Police 4. 2009 Pittsburgh police shootings The 2009 Pittsburgh police shootings was a shootout that took place on Saturday, April 4, 2009, at 1016 Fairfield Street in the Stanton Heights neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, United States, stemming from an argument over a dog urinating in the house between a mother and her 22-year-old son. At approximately 7:11 a.m. EDT, 22-year-old Richard Poplawski opened fire on two Pittsburgh police officers responding to a 911 call from Poplawski's mother, who was attempting to get the police officers to remove her son from the home. 3 police officers were ultimately confirmed dead, and another 2 were seriously injured. Poplawski was armed with a semi-automatic AK-47 style rifle and 2 other guns, protected by a bulletproof vest, and had been lying in wait for the officers. According to police and witnesses, he held police at bay for 4 hours as the fallen officers were left bleeding nearby, their colleagues unable to reach them. More than 100 rounds were fired by the SWAT teams and Poplawski, who surrendered after suffering a gunshot wound to the leg. Deaths: Pittsburgh Police, 3, Suspect, 0. Lakewood Police Officer Shooting on Sunday, November 29, 2009, 4 Lakewood, Washington police officers were shot and killed at a coffee shop in the Parkland unincorporated area of Pierce County, Washington, United States. One gunman entered the coffee shop, fired at the officers as they sat working on their laptop computers, and then fled the scene. After a 2-day manhunt that spanned several cities in the Puget Sound region, the alleged gunman was shot and killed by a Seattle Police Department officer in South Seattle. Deaths: Suspect 0. Police, 4. Christopher Dorner shootings and manhunt from February 3, 2013, former LAPD officer Christopher Dorner killed 3 people and injured 3 other officers. On February 12, Dorner engaged in a shootout with police at Big Bear Lake, California, killing 1 and injuring another. The police then deployed CS gas which possibly set Dorner's cabin on fire, whereupon Dorner committed suicide. Deaths: Police 2 Dorner, 1. 2013 Watertown Shootout April 18, 2013. After killing 3 civilians and injuring hundreds at the Boston Marathon on April 15, brothers Dzhokhar and Tamerlan Tsarnaev shot and killed a police officer on the campus of MIT. Later in the night they engaged in a shootout with officers in Watertown, Massachusetts where they injured 16 officers and Tamerlan Tsarnaev was killed while Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was arrested the next day. Deaths: Police 1 Suspects, 1. Twin Peaks Shootout May 17, 2015. In one of the deadliest gang shootings in United States history, a brawl between rival biker gangs in front of a Twin Peaks restaurant in Waco, Texas escalates into a shootout between rival gangs as well as police. 9 people were killed and 18 others were injured. Deaths: Gang members, 9, injuries, 18. UMPQUA Community College shooting October 1, 2015. After killing 9 civilians and injuring 9 others at UMPQUA Community College near Roseburg, Oregon, shooter Christopher Harper Mercer then immediately engaged in a shootout with responding police officers before killing himself. Deaths: Suspects 1. Other famous shootouts Spiritwood Incident July 7, 2006. Constables Robin Cameron and Mark Bordages of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police were both shot in the head through the windshield of their cruiser after a 27 km car chase and shootout with Curtis Janace in rural Saskatchewan. Deaths: RCMP2. Janace, 0. Maytop Incident On March 3, 2005 James Roscoe ambushed and killed Royal Canadian Mounted Police Constables Peter Sheeman, Anthony Gordon, Lionel Johnston and Brock Merrill with a prohibited HK-91 rifle during a stakeout. The resulting shootout with other present RCMP officers came to an end when Roscoe committed suicide after being wounded. Deaths: RCMP4. James Roscoe, 1. 1991 Lokhandwala Complex Shootout November 16, 1991. Additional Commissioner of Police Aftab Ahmed Khan, head of the ATS led a force of almost 100 policemen and ATS officers and attacked the Swati building at the Lokhandwala complex in Bombay. In the ensuing shootout which lasted 4 hours, 450 rounds were fired and 7 gangsters belonging to the D Company were killed, including Maya Dolas, Dilip Bhaiya and Anil Paur. Deaths: Gangsters 7. ATS and Mumbai Police, 0, injuries, gangsters 0. ATS and Mumbai Police, 2. Jules Bonnot April 24, 1912, when 3 police officers confronted anarchist Jules Bonnot in a fence's apartment, Bonnot opened fire on the officers, killing the vice chief of the Shoot National before fleeing across adjacent rooftops. Outcome, Shoot 1 killed. 1 wounded. Bonnot Gang, 0, April 28, 1912. 500 police officers, soldiers, firemen, and lynch mob participants exchanged fire with Bonnot in a Paris suburb. The conflict ended after police bombed the building in which Bonnot was taking cover. Outcome, police 3 wounded. Bonnot, Kia, further information, Jules Bonnot, Bonnot Gang. David Malcolm Gray November 14, 1990, after a shooting rampage which killed up to 13 people in the small seaside township of Aramoana, New Zealand, members of the Special Tactics Group surrounded the house where shooter David Malcolm Gray was hiding and a gun battle took place after failed attempts to lure him out. At the end, Gray ran out of the house, firing his rifle from the hip before being struck and knocked down by gunfire from STG officers. Gray subsequently died on the journey to hospital. Outcome, STG 1 wounded. Gray, killed. Further information, Aramoana massacre. Rodney Ansell Rodney Ansell was an Australian bushman who served as the inspiration for the Crocodile Dundee films. On August 3, 1999, Ansell ambushed several police officers at a road-blocked intersection and fatally shot one of them. A gun battle erupted as more officers arrived on scene, and Ansell was killed in the ensuing gunfight. The day before his attack on police, Ansell had been on a rampage, shooting at houses and wounding several civilians. Date: August 3, 1999. Location: Acacia Hills, Northern Territory, Australia. Result: 2 persons shot dead. Several civilians wounded. Mumbai Massacre On November 26, 2008, 10 members of the Pakistani militant group Lashkar-e-Taiba carried out shooting sprees at several different locations throughout the Indian city of Mumbai. The terrorists, heavily armed with automatic weapons and explosives, overwhelmed the initial response from lightly armed and minimally trained police and held out for nearly 3 days, inflicting almost 500 casualties, with 157 deaths. 9 of the 10 attackers were killed, while the 10th was arrested and later executed for the crime. Date: 26 November 29, 2008. Location: Mumbai, India. Results: 166 deaths, 293 injuries, 1 terrorist arrested. Further information: 2008 Mumbai attacks. Manila hostage crisis. Former police officer Rolando Mendoza boarded a bus with Hong Kong tourists taking the occupants hostage. After freeing 4 children, senior citizens and a disabled woman, the shootout began after the on-board TV broadcast showing the arrest of his younger brother. Enraged, Mendoza took the tour guide and shot him in the head at the door. It took the SWAT team almost 2 hours to kill Mendoza with a sniper. The assault killed 8 hostages, and wounded 7 hostages, 1 journalist and 1 bystander. Date: August 23, 2010. Location: Rizal Park, Manila, Philippines. Result: shooter 1 dead, hostages 8. 9 others wounded. January 2015 Ile de France attacks. 3 AQAP terrorists, brothers Car Copyright Riff and Saudi Karachi and Amity Koulibaly, committed a series of 5 attacks that resulted in the deaths in 20 people, including themselves. The Kouachis killed 2 police officers during the Charlie Hebdo shooting on January 7 before fleeing. Koulibaly shot and killed a policewoman the next day. Finally, on 9 January, the Kouachis and Koulibaly held separate sieges which resulted in shootouts with police and all 3 being killed. Date: 7 January 9, 2015. Location: Ile-de-France. France. Deaths: terrorists 3, police 3, civilians 14. Injuries 22. References: Kolkak, David. California Justice, Shootouts, Lynching and Assassinations in the Golden State. Word Dancer Press. P9 ISBN 1-884995-54-3, Jerome Taylor, The Extraordinary Life and Death of Joseph A. Mabry, East Tennessee Historical Society Publications, No. 44, pages 41-70. The Battle of Matteawan, Drama at Blair House, The Attempted Assassination of Harry Truman. Riverside Sheriff's Association account. Related news article about event. FBI honoring the fallen. FBI. Toddler slain in police shootout had cocaine in system. LA police kill gunman, child in shootout. Man arrested for selling gun to Scott Barnaby. Gun dealer is sentenced to time in prison. 450 rounds were fired. Like bullets were doing the talking. Indian Express. May 20, 2007. Retrieved June 1, 2007.